Hello. In an effort to understand Islam better, I was fortunate enough to conduct an interview with Ali Mahmoud. During that time, we went over the various questions, and he basically started by telling me a little bit about himself, and I'll share that with you. He is an Egyptian male who is heterosexual and currently married with one son. Their economic status is middle class. They live in a suburban area, and he drives a charter bus. When we started the interview, we looked at the framed questions first and just kind of noticed that they wanted a little bit of discussion about how his journey began and evolved. Ali explained to me that it was not a very spectacular experience, as he was raised by a family of Muslims and just basically took on their faith. It's interesting to note that in a current Pew Research study entitled Religious Switching, 23% of adults who were raised as Muslim actually no longer believe, which is at par with Christianity, and which is the predominant religion of the United States. I thought this was fascinating because Mahmoud is someone who was raised as a Muslim, and a quarter of those who are raised as Muslim will fall away from the faith. But what is really interesting is where approximately a quarter of people who fall away from the faith in both Christianity and the Muslim faith of Islam, 23% there's a 23% rate of converts to the Muslim faith, whereas Christians only receive a 6% conversion rate. So, as you can see with Islam, the amount of people that they lose is equivalent to the amount of people that they gain. So there is not much of a decrease in the Muslim population, whereas with Christians, there's only a 6% conversion rate, and there's a prediction that Christians and Christianity will decrease in the United States. Another interesting fact is that Muslims will have increased across the world by 73% between the years of 2010 and 2050, followed by Christians, who are projected to grow by 35% during the same period, and Hindus at 34%. So as you can see, the Muslim faith is really growing. So Islam in general, in both the United States and in Europe, is really just booming. And I think that's part of the reason I was drawn to speaking with a Muslim, because I wanted to understand the Islam faith better, and to better understand why there is such a rapid conversion rate right now. For my second question, I asked Ali if he could describe to me a little bit about the Islam religion and what is required as somebody who is a believer. So we discussed the texts and rituals of the Muslim belief system. And Ali shared with me that the predominant religious text that he uses and that other Muslims that he knows utilizes are the Quran and the Torah and the Injil. For someone who comes from a Christian background, that would be the equivalent of the Torah, which is the Jewish book of law and book of Moses. And Injil would be the equivalent of the Christian text of the Gospels. So what's interesting about the Islam faith is that it basically takes the Jewish Old Testament Torah, and then it takes the Christian New Testament Gospels and integrates that into the faith, adding to it the Quran. Also, many Muslims will read the stories of Muhammad in order to interpret and understand the lifestyle required of the Islamic faith. Ali specifically answered to me that if you're a good Muslim, you'll pray 5 times a day and celebrate Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr, and Eid al-Adha. Forgive my pronunciation, please. Another holy day that some Muslims celebrate is Hajj, a pilgrimage to Mecca. he explained that he did not have to go because he was physically unable to with his current job. And that there is understanding when it comes to financial and physical limitations. He also is unable to pray 5 times a day or fast during the day when he is driving, and that is allowed. There are definitely exceptions allowed. Ramadan is basically, to describe it a little bit, is a fasting period during the day from sunup to sundown. They are not allowed. It was explained to me that Muslims are not allowed to eat or drink nothing, not even water, until sunset, at which time they can ingest food again. At the end of that 30-day fast is at Al-Fitr, which is a celebration of the end of the fast. Another holy day that some Muslims celebrate, which I mentioned earlier, was Hajj. That's the pilgrimage to Mecca. That basically is based upon the story of, it's a biblical story actually, in the Old Testament, where Abraham has basically I guess you could say he takes on his wife's nurse, Hagar, who he has a child with named Ishmael. And when Abraham's wife kicks Hagar out of the home as a result of tensions between her and her nurse, and basically a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of rivalry, Hagar has Ishmael in the desert, and she's just wandering and trying to find any kind of sustenance for her son, and it is provided by God. And so this wandering and then being provided for is expressed in the pilgrimage to Mecca. I asked Ali what he liked most about his religion to kind of try to get an understanding about the things that he appreciates as he expresses his faith, and then also things that might be frustrating or limiting or things that he disagrees with. And his answer basically was, and throughout the interview, was this just undaunted pride in his faith. And he basically said there was nothing that he didn't like about it at all, and that he was willing to suffer through the restrictions, which for a male would be not eating pork, not gambling, not drinking alcohol. And he said these things he was willing to give up. The thing he likes the most about his religion is the Quran. And he said he felt that all other religions have holy books that were written by man, and the Quran was never touched by human hands. And this is something that many Muslims believe. And they believe just that there is this absolute purity and inspiration in the revelation of the Quran, that it has never been corrupted. And he says knowing that he has this divinely written text makes him feel special. Also, I notated here that when Muslims explain the Quran, they say that it is the direct revelation received straight from Gabriel to Muhammad without any interference or corruption, as I said. For question 4, I asked Ali, how does one profess their faith in Islam and become a Muslim believer? I felt this also would give me some understanding about how a convert might go about becoming a Muslim, and just what was required. So he specifically said if you want to become a Muslim, you should go to a mosque and ask the imam, which would be the leader, to help you and guide you. And you must publicly state that there is no other God besides Allah, that Allah has no son, and that the final prophet was Muhammad. All of this will be said in Arabic. If you don't know Arabic, you can repeat after the imam. Ali said, "This is different than Christians because we do not believe in the Trinity, and it is different than the Jews because they reject Jesus and Muhammad." Question number 5. What do Muslims believe about the afterlife? I have to admit I was quite curious about this because I think one of the popular beliefs is that one of the inspirations for jihadists and one of the inspirations for Muslims in general to attain the afterlife is that they're promised 72 virgins in heaven. And even when I talked to Ali about this a little bit, he seemed to also believe this, although in the research that I did, this was mostly considered to be mythology. Basically, there are some references which are extra textual outside of the Quran mostly that refer to 72 virgins. When Ali talked to me about this, he said, well, you know, the women are made virgins when they go to heaven, and I'm allowed to take on two believers. Apparently, the other 70 would be soulless servants that were created specifically to provide all of your sensual desires in heaven. So he would be allowed to have his wife, one other believer, and then 70 individuals who were not human, apparently, and would be servants. This was kind of fascinating to me, but like I said, it was mostly debunked in the majority of the research that I did as kind of a folklore, but it is definitely something that a lot of people believe. The basic concept that I understood is that, as Ali explained to me, is that I notated here that you're allowed to do the things you're not allowed to do on earth, like gambling and drinking alcohol. And along those lines, I believe, is the idea that all of your sensual pleasures are allowed to be indulged in heaven, whether it be fornication or alcoholism or gambling or whatever, that you could just be completely hedonistic in heaven, which was a fascinating concept to me as a Christian. And that was one thing that he talked about. The other thing that was really unique is that it's not unique to see that heaven is attained by your deeds, but it was interesting that they have kind of a story that there's a bridge you have to cross over, which is literally kind of arching over hell. And he said that it's the size of a horse's hair, which is interesting. And that when you cross it, if you are weighted down by your bad behaviors and deeds, you'll fall right into hell. But if you're lightened by the blessed load of doing righteous deeds, that you'll prance across the bridge into your heavenly abode. So that was basically the concept that I was given by Ali. One thing that was really interesting is we talked about the jihad aspect, because I had always been told that the way that jihadists were recruited to do terroristic things like bombings and strapping bombs themselves and doing suicide type missions is because they were promised that you would automatically go to heaven. And it actually is mentioned in a lot of different texts that you do go automatically to heaven if you're a jihad. But what was interesting that Ali taught me and that I looked up is that a jihad is not necessarily somebody who kills their enemy, first of all. Secondly, jihad just means struggle. So jihadists often struggle in 3 areas. 1 is the inner struggle to live out their faith. 2 is a struggle to build their Muslim community. And 3 is a struggle to defend Islam by holy war if necessary. But in the case of holy war, there is also criteria. And it has to be that you were attacked first. It has to be that it is something that would be pleasing to Muhammad. It has to be that your behavior would not be unjust. You cannot afflict harm on the innocents. So all of these things kind of fly in the face of what we see on television when we see radicalized, fringe jihadists performing really violent acts. So that was really comforting for me, because I had been kind of under the belief that it was just a violent act that was actually allowing someone to go to heaven. Question number 6, do you feel that Islam is oppressive to women? I have to confess that as a woman, when I see women wearing burqas, it seemed oppressive to me. And coming from a faith where being Christian at times, being a fundamentalist, I have experienced my own forms of sexism. So I kind of think maybe I project it sometimes and make assumptions. And also having seen different pieces here and there of women getting acid thrown on them and all kinds of horrible things, I just associated this with a form of oppression. But fascinatingly, Ali said to me that Islam regards women and men as equals. Women are free to wear whatever they want or to go to school or work. And he shared a personal story that his wife asked him if he wanted her to wear the veil, and he said it's completely up to you. And she made the decision to wear it, but there was absolutely no pressure from him, and he said he would have been completely fine if she hadn't worn it. When I was doing my research on this, I was reading from the International Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences, a special issue on change and Muslim women. And they talked a lot about the fact that prior to the Muslim faith, to the Islamic faith, there was a period of time called Al-Jahiliyyah, which is considered a time of barbarism and pre-Islam. And actually, during this period of time, women were treated as property and commodities and were really, really horribly mistreated, as I mentioned here and in this little text on the bottom. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is that the extent of this abuse was so severe that infanticide was widely practiced. And there was a particular person who said there were two things that made him laugh and cry. The thing that made him cry was when he took his daughter to be buried alive, and she was digging in the while she was digging in the ground, he was digging in the ground, I apologize, she would wipe the dust off of his beard, not knowing what was going to happen to her. And the thing that made him laugh was when he used to make gods out of dates and put them by his bed to guard him, but when he woke up, he would devour them. So to me, that is just so incredibly repulsive and terrifying. And in a way, I guess, to people that practice Islam, it was tremendously relieving to experience the freedoms that came with Islam, albeit slow. Question number 7, how does Islam view the LGBT community? Right away, Ali expressed that in the Bible, God created Adam and Eve. They were separated, male and female. But then he said quickly, Islam does not expect people to abide by Islam. We know we can't change everyone else. And I thought that was really interesting. But then I pressed him a little further and said, okay, so you let everybody else practice this, but what if your son were to say something to you? And he got really kind of a little unnerved by that and said, well, I'm lucky I haven't had to experience that yet. And he did express to me that it was considered a sin in Judaism and Christianity and Islam and in all of the texts that he utilized, but that he would never be hateful towards any person. And then when I did some digging, I noticed that in 1987, Ayatollah Khomeini declared transgender surgical operations allowable. In 1988, Al-Azhar declared gender reassignment surgery allowed. And in 2013, the Islamic Society of North America declared its approval of the employment of the Non-Discrimination Act, saying that workers could not be judged based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And I thought that was really progressive. Question number 8, have you ever endured discrimination based on your belief system? Ali got very emotional when he told me the story of working as a charter bus driver, and there was a singing group that got on the bus, and one of the women asked him his name, and being his name is Ali Mahmoud, it was kind of evident that he was Arabic, and she cursed him in Arabic because she was from Israel, and she cursed him based on his faith, and he was embarrassed in front of the people that were there, and they asked her to apologize, and she said don't be sensitive. And he said he felt that this was part of the media portraying all Muslims as terrorists, and that it's just been kind of acceptable to yell out curses and epithets at Muslim people. What would you like people to know about Islam is how I kind of wrapped up this interview, and good thing because we're right at 20 minutes. He said, I wish people would know that we are strict, but we're not as strict as we are portrayed. We just want to do the right and good thing. Islam is not a religion of violence. We are not all terrorists. We love our family, and we are proud of our religion. And basically, I want to end with that and just say how I would apply this to my own social work practices. I think it's really helping me to dispel some of the countertransference that I might have put forth, being that I was raised in a Christian household which was very anti-Muslim and regarded Muslim people as being violent, and that the whole Islamic faith was a faith of violence and extreme violence against Christians. And so I don't know that I can possibly undo my entire history and heritage, but I do think this opens my eyes to the fact that this is not a religion that condones murder or discrimination or inequality, which is something that I had been spoon-fed my whole life. And I think this was really beneficial to me so that it enables me to better help people who might come to me who would be of this background. And also something that I might want to offer you and say that we could do at a meso level is to continue to try to appeal to this population in their communities, try to establish more resources within these communities, because these communities, like Ali said, are very insular. They really love being around each other, being close-knit, being family-oriented. They really appreciate things that are catered specifically to the Islamic population. And there are more and more resources coming out to help advocate for women, for, like I said, people of the LGBT community. And I think in general, just providing more resources that are faith-based within communities of dense populations of Islamic Muslims, I think would be really beneficial. Also, just a word to you, read up on Muslims. As Ali said, there's a lot of misinformation and miseducation out there, and I think it would be of value to all of us to re-educate ourselves and to talk to a Muslim, talk to an imam, go to a mosque, and just let down some of those walls and barriers that have been created based on all of the negative press that's out there. Thank you so much.